Awesome. Well, welcome. Welcome, everybody. Welcome to the breakout session on building your brand. Hope everybody enjoyed that panel. I certainly did. And I know we have, I think the panelists just did an amazing job. And as in any discussion, I always wish it continued to happen. But I'm excited to be here. My name is Stacy Menzares, and I am Manager of Professional Development for ISC Squared. I've had a long career. Certainly in the association world and in learning and development, and have a lot of experience to share, and looking forward to everybody participating in this discussion. So sort of want to open it up, and when I was asked to do this session and graciously appreciate the offer, really thought about what building a brand meant to me. And it's kind of funny because I don't think anybody said early in my career, you need to build your brand, you need to focus on your brand. That really didn't happen to me. I sort of fell into it and realized now later in my career how important it was. And I had some successes and probably also hurt my brand along the way. So I think it's always a great discussion to have. And I love the fact that people are starting to become more intentional about building their brand. So what building a brand to me means is how I want to be perceived, right? What I want to contribute to the organization I'm working with, what I want to contribute to society as a whole, and continuing to focus on that. And I think where I struggled is maybe being part of organizations where maybe somebody has attacked my brand or has perceived me to be something that I didn't perceive myself to be. And everybody always says perception is reality, but I also feel like there has to be some justification around that perception for it to be reality, but a lot of people don't dive into that. So I'm curious for the group here, if anybody wants to share in the chat on what does it mean to build a brand, and why is it important? What have you experienced in your career? Okay, now this is designed to be a good an interactive piece, so I'd love for people to share if they want to and have an opportunity, and if I'm resonating with some other questions. But I also want to go a little bit about how I built my brand and how I focus on building my brand. One of the keys that I wanted to be in my career was I pride myself on being a great number two. I don't necessarily want to be the CEO of an organization, but I do want to be supportive of the CEO. I want to be a number two to my manager, to my director. I want to be that go-to resource. And confidant. That's important to me. That's the brand I like to establish. And to do that, there's a couple of things I had to do. One is I always had to be very dependable, right? If somebody asked me to do something, I did it. If I didn't know what I was doing, I asked what I needed to do to make sure I delivered. So being dependable was important. I think in the session earlier, we talked about volunteering or always saying yes. That's important. If you want to be that number two, which I want to be, or you want to be a credible resource in the organization, it's important to say yes and not like, well, this isn't in my job description, or I'm happy to do this, but I won't do it unless you promote me or give me more money. That's not what it's about. It's about being able to show that you have skills that you can apply to other things in the organization. So those were really important for me. I also wanted to be present during meetings. So yes, we talked about having a seat at the table. When you have that seat at a table, it's not just sitting there, it's actually saying something and being confident that you can ask questions, or you want points of clarification, or add some of your experience to get the conversation going. Just being in a meeting is not building a brand that you want to have. Basically it was just being genuine through my entire career. Now, I said earlier, in some cases I was very successful, but in other cases I wasn't. And I also had to spend some time rebuilding my brand. So when perhaps maybe I did not achieve what I wanted to achieve, I had to kind of go back and sort of rebuild that brand and figure out how to do that. I'm curious if anybody has any experiences similar to mine that they might want to share.
This is April. I can share a brand related experience.
Thank you.
I was in the process of trying to be promoted to VP. And so I hired a professional coach to help me, because one of the things that I felt like I was missing was that I didn't understand. I felt like I knew what my brand was, which, similar to you, you talk about being dependable and being genuine and having gravitas and delivering and awesome outcomes, and also being, the talent magnet, the people that want to work with you and collaborate with you, etc. And I was struggling a little bit because my manager wasn't somebody who gave me feedback, period. Like, not even constructive feedback, or recognized when I had done something exceptionally well, or even well. And so part of my thought process was to try and say, do I perceive myself the same way that others perceive me? What is my brand out there? So I hired a professional coach who came in, and she conducted 360s with my peers, with my manager's peers, with the CEO of the company. And I got back this report that basically illustrated that half of how I perceived myself was accurate, and the other half wasn't so accurate, much to my dismay, because you always think you know yourself really well. And one of the things that was in there that was, it was a lesson learned for me, was that in an earlier panel, Roxanne talked about that people look up to you, they listen to you. And I happen to be the only female senior director in the entire company. And so I didn't perceive that I was that influential, or that people listened to every word I said, And so sometimes when I was a bit forceful, or I was a bit assertive, I actually scared some people, or I shut them down, because I wasn't perceived as approachable in every scenario. I would get stressed. And what happens when you are an active person and you get stressed, you kind of go into a bit of command and control. And I didn't recognize that in myself. I recognized it as I was pushing to get something done that a customer needed. And that's how forceful my whole body just went into, force mode. And so what I learned in that experience was that my brand was how I was perceiving myself was a mismatch. And so I needed to internalize that feedback. And if I wanted my brand to be the influential female leader that has gravitas when it matters, but also too listens and slows down enough that I could be approachable, that even if I am stressed, that sometimes my face needed to soften a little bit so that people would perceive me as approachable, a listener, will get something done, but that will also to take into account the person who's coming to me to maybe help me, or come to me with an obstacle that needs to be solved, that was part of the brand I really wanted. So I had to embrace that feedback. So that's a personal lesson learned for me on the difference between what I perceived my brand to be and how others perceived my brand to be.
Right. And April, thank you for sharing that. It is funny though, because this is women in leadership type a session. It's funny when you're early in my career, I didn't want to be that perceived as the female that was influential. I wanted to be right there with everybody else. And I think in a way, people perceive me through 365, through the 365 reviews that I was mean, or I was used, the B word and all that kind of stuff. But so I think as women, they expect us to be a little bit softer, a little bit more compassionate. And I was trying to be like my big brother and nope, and trying to be the man in the room. And that's not what I needed to do. So I learned that as well. But again, I think having those people evaluate you and having, you think you're one way, but if you're perceived differently, there's a way to sort of alter that. I'm seeing some comments in the chat.
Oh, I think Jennifer, do you want to say something?
Yeah, I mean, I'll jump in. I'm over my shyness now. I've had the opposite experience, sort of the opposite experience, where I will tend to use self-deprecating humor in meetings, and when I'm conversing with someone else, and before I say something, I might say something like I just did. I'm over my shyness now, or well, this might be crazy, but. And as I became more senior in the organization, I got feedback that when I do that, it can be it sort of takes away from my authority or detracts from my voice. And I've had to work at not doing that. Obviously, I use humor a lot just in general, but when I'm trying to make a point or when I'm trying to have some impact or have that gravitas, I've gotten the feedback that it's important not to be self-deprecating or not to sort of use humor to diffuse the emotion or the situation. So that's kind of the opposite feedback, or the opposite tendency, if you will.
Right. Yeah, that's great, Jennifer. Thank you. One thing when I was preparing this conversation, April, you and I talked about this a little earlier. I'm curious if anybody is seeing an impact on what they're doing or how they're managing their brand and how they're keeping their brand going in light of COVID and the different environment that we are in right now. I mean, it's one thing to be able to have that humor in face-to-face meetings, or you see colleagues and you network in those face-to-face environments. But now that everything is done through technology, and some of us have, not me, but some of my colleagues have screaming kids in the background and all that kind of stuff. So what we've done is build these great brands, and now we're in an environment where maybe I say with my colleagues, sometimes I see their parent voice that I was not aware they even had. So, they're in a meeting and all of a sudden their child comes in. And so I'm curious if anybody is seeing or has any experience with if they're running into obstacles on trying to build their brand and maintain the brand in light of what's going on with COVID and us being all at home. And Jennifer, I hate to call on you, but now that you found your voice, curious if you're seeing anything. Or
yeah, I mean, I was just going to type into chat because I don't want to dominate.
That's okay.
Certainly, I think the idea of brand might be changing a little bit, because this remote work, at least in my workplace, and I work for Harvard Business School, which is not the most touchy-feely workplace. But I think we're all in everybody's living rooms now, and it's made us all more human to each other. I think we're all dealing with family and kids and different challenges, and so I think the idea of brand might be changing a little bit, and we might all be able to be a little more real and authentic and human with one another, and that would make me happy. I certainly am seeing that in my own organization. Our CEO gives weekly updates to the group, the whole company, and he occasionally has done it from his daughter's, who's now in college, his daughter's bedroom. So there's like all these pink posters and pink stuffed animals, and here's our CEO giving the weekly update to the company on the financials, and it's kind of wonderful, actually. For me, I don't know if everyone experiences it that way.
I would agree. And there's an interesting comment in here from Rebecca, and that she says, I know I need to build a consistent brand. I'm the art department, but it's hard to network in a small rural town. And let's talk a little bit about networking, because networking is very important to building your brand and how you might go about doing that. Some of the things I do, I don't live in I actually moved to a fairly small town. But one of the things I've done, one is just not only networking with colleagues, but I do a lot of volunteer work for the American Cancer Society. And that was where I really wanted to focus on how I might expand my network outside of my profession. I felt that was important. I had a lot of connections with people in the association world, a lot of connections with people in learning and development, but I felt the need to really get out and do something different and meet people that were within different industries. And I've been volunteering on the same event for over 10 years and have been able to establish a network that has just been amazing, because I get to share what I do and communicate what I do, but I also get to bounce ideas off of other women that are either professionals or, maybe they're retired, maybe they're just stay-at-home moms, those types of things. So it gives me a little bit more of an opportunity to network and to meet other people that way. I don't know if that's an opportunity in a more of a small rural town, but getting out in the community and not necessarily within your organization, but getting out and networking has been really helpful for me, especially now where everybody works remotely as well. I don't know if anybody else has a similar experience they want to share on how they've been able to expand their network. And
with 5 minutes remaining, please, another shy person, find your voice if you can. Would love to hear. I would especially like to hear what others are doing to network during COVID. I'm a very social person. I miss going to conferences. I miss catching up with others in a physical sense. I was excited that we were still going to do Fusion, but Fusion honestly is the highlight of my year, and I just love going and meeting and talking to customers. I've had blisters year over year just from running around meeting people. What are some ideas or suggestions that have worked for you in terms of how you've networked during COVID?
So this is Melissa from D2L. I would say I've similarly, April, to what you're indicating, originally found it a little bit challenging because of the way that we're used to networking, being in a room, attending an event with people. But what I did is I took what some of the benefits were in COVID, which is, hey, I have some extra time now on my hands that maybe because I'm not traveling or, trying to use those windows to then reconnect with some groups that I'd lost contact with and use the virtual forum, which can be a little bit more time efficient. And so just trying to join a few other groups. There's like a local CFO group that I had lost touch with, or a book club that I'm now joining this way, which it's a little bit difficult with so many people to figure out when. Sometimes I find it challenging when to speak, or because you're sort of waiting for the room, but it's been a good way for me to try to help fill my cup on that networking piece where I was starting to feel like that was falling down a bit, and it's been great to see how others have grown as well. Some people are maybe prior mentors that I had lost touch with, and so it's just been a different way to try to do that for me.
Thank you, Melissa. I think that's really important. One thing that also comes to mind, and what I try to encourage my team to do when you're networking, especially in the virtual environment, a lot of building your brand is, what they say, dressing for success or making sure you're looking the part and stuff. And when you're on virtual environments, it's equally as important to do that, right? It's equally as important to make sure that you've got your game face on, that you're ready, and and it helps with networking as well, and also with building your brand and making sure you're consistent and that you're always have that professional outlook, because I think you can't let your guard down when in a virtual environment. And many of us probably have. It's been challenging, especially not being able to get to hair salons or anything like that. So, but trying to make sure that you stay professional, but human. And as Jennifer said, that we're learning a lot more about people just by the backgrounds and in their home environment.
So actually, the whole point of the Women in Leadership Network is to give us all an opportunity to network with each other. And I strongly encourage you all to, join the discussion forum and help support each other. And so I think one other suggestion I would have in terms of the networking piece of it is that if you're willing to spend the time mentoring others, then they're going to be willing to extend their network to you. And also, I have found informational interviews as an invaluable way to meet new people and to learn more about what they do, and therefore sometimes be able to offer advice or guidance or effort, if you will, in helping them accomplish their respective goals. Would be one other thing that I have tried in my past. And Stacy, I'm sad to say our breakout session is now done. I'm going to ask you all, please join the main Zoom session. Corey has added the link in the chat session. We're all going to rejoin as a group so that we can hear what happened in the other sessions. Stacy will represent our discussion here. with the rest of the breakouts, and so that we can have the, if you will, the advantage of being in every every breakout session. So Corey, thanks for adding the link in that chat, and Stacy, thank you so much for facilitating.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.